Renée looked at herself from head to toe once more. There was only one such mirror in her rented apartment, a full-length mirror built into the door of a narrow but surprisingly spacious closet. She was truly unrecognisable. Her wheat-coloured hair had been replaced with long dark red locks. Light foundation masked her naturally swarthy skin, and she had painted her lips to appear brighter and thinner. The transformation aged her by 5 years and changed her so dramatically that even her grandmother might not recognise her. Her figure remained unchanged. There wasn't much she could do about that. She had borrowed a shabby blouse and loose pants from a neighbour. Though the clothes concealed her exact dimensions, her slender frame was still apparent. Yes, Renée was ready. Surely now Uncle John, the guard, wouldn't recognise her as the former employee who had been banned from entering the company office. She lingered before the mirror, debating whether to wear dark glasses. They would add to her disguise, but they might also raise suspicion. Besides, wearing sunglasses indoors would seem odd. Glasses? Renée slapped her forehead. I could wear fake reading glasses. Such details really transform a face. Renée was going to warn Mr. Porter about the danger he was in. She had already lost precious time, through no fault of her own, but now she had to act. He had always been kind to her, and she would do anything to help him. She remembered her first day at the company, when its building had amazed her with its striking blend of concrete and glass. The building was both stylish and majestic, reminiscent of a gleaming Christmas tree. That was her first thought upon seeing the tall structure in the city's business district. Though initially intimidated, Renée quickly steeled herself. After all, she was only applying to be a cleaner, not an assistant director. She had spotted the vacancy online and applied. The salary seemed unusually high, perhaps even a mistake, but she decided to try anyway. In the lobby, she met a friend, gallant security guard, elderly but fit and athletic. He gave her detailed directions to the personnel department, where they were expecting her. As Renée climbed the stairs, she looked in her surroundings. She liked the place immediately, with its fashionable minimalist atmosphere and pleasant scent, a subtle mix of coffee and citrus. The interview was brief. Mrs. Emmett, the HR director, asked a few questions and hired her on the spot. No, we'll call you. Mrs. Emmett simply asked when Renée could start, and the young woman was ready to start right away. She desperately needed the money. She had spent the month since graduation fruitfully searching for work in her field. Every application had been rejected. Only one honest HR officer had explained that employers now demanded experience, and the market was saturated with economics graduates. So Renée decided to return to her previous line of work. It was the work that had sustained her through her student years, when scholarships barely covered expenses. Renée knew how to clean. She'd learned as a preschooler, when her grandmother still worked long hours, leaving young Renée to manage the household. From childhood, she understood she needed to care for her only living relative. They had no one else. Renée's mother had died of pneumonia when her daughter was just 3. Her grandmother explained how they'd mistaken it for a common cold, treating it at home and expecting it to resolve itself as usual. It didn't. By the time they got her mother to the hospital, it was too late for the doctors to help. That left just Renée and her grandmother alone in the world. As for her father, he had never been part of Renée's life. He likely didn't even know she existed. She was the result of a brief holiday romance, her mother, having saved enough for her first ever seaside vacation with friends, had fallen in love. She never revealed his name, origin, or any details about him, not even to her own mother. She kept saying that when Renée grows up, they would talk then. But that important conversation never happened. Grandma and Rennie lived modestly but happily together in their cosy home. The girl studied hard, earned good grades, and stayed away from trouble. From a young age, she helped with housework and learned to cook. By the time grandmother came home from work, a delicious dinner waited on the kitchen table, prepared by young hands from whatever was in the refrigerator. The floors were clean and everything was in its place. "You're a good girl," the old woman would smile each time. She never took her granddaughter's help for granted. Rennie grew into a bright young woman, studying with ease and earning her teacher's praise. Well before Rennie's graduation, her grandmother began saying their small town wasn't enough for her. "You should go to the city to study and work. You're too smart for this place. Why stay here? I'll help you get into a university in the city." Rennie herself knew that her beloved hometown, despite its charms, offered limited prospect. There were few options for further education. There was a construction school where most teenagers studied, but Rennie couldn't see herself in that field. Jobs were scarce too. Her grandmother worked as a saleswoman at the store on the neighbouring street, spending long days on her feet. After her shift, she took on additional cleaning work. She worked tirelessly for the money they needed. Some townspeople worked at the nearby brickyard, while most women worked on the farm. The town had just a school, construction school, clinic and library. That was all. Besides, beyond the practical concerns, Rennie yearned to leave her village. She dreamed of seeing the world, working in a city office building. Through hard work, she earned admission to a prestigious university's economics program with a full scholarship. This was no stroke of luck. Rennie had worked diligently to achieve it. When her grandmother heard the news, she wept with joy. "Now your life will be better. Everything will be different," she said. "Even though I'm retired, I'll work extra shifts to send you money. You focus on your studies, my clever girl." At the time, Rennie felt her future was secured. After all, she'd cleared the biggest hurdle, and she knew how to study. Reality, however, would prove different from her dreams, though she didn't realize it during those joyful days after her acceptance. At first, everything seemed perfect. As a non-local student, Rennie received dormitory housing. She shared a room with 2 other students, which made studying challenging. The constant chatter, laughter, and occasional arguments never ceased. Still, Rennie appreciated that the dormitory was near the university. Unlike many students, she didn't have to endure a crowded subway. Instead, she enjoyed pleasant walks through the beautiful city streets. Then she found refuge in the university library, falling in love with it immediately. The quiet atmosphere, the smell of books, and the focused readers created an inspiring environment. Rennie maintained her diligent study habits, though she initially lagged classmates who had attended university preparation courses, an opportunity she never had. Despite this disadvantage, she loved her studies. She delighted in mastering complex economic concepts, analysing financial reports, and learning economic history. Within a year, she rose to the top of her class, making both herself and her grandmother proud. Her grandmother now worked double shifts at the store to send money, knowing city life was expensive. The scholarship, even when increased for good performance, wasn't enough to live on. Rennie deeply appreciated her grandmother's sacrifice. She knew the long hours at the store took their toll on her aging grandmother, who struggled with heart problems, back pain, and high blood pressure. Rennie dreamed of finishing university, establishing her career, and giving back to her grandmother, providing for better medical care and well-deserved rest. In her daydreams, Rennie saw herself as a successful professional in a stylish business suit, driving a luxury car to a towering office building. She imagined herself confident and beautiful, eager to tackle each intense workday's challenges. She liked a challenge. The girl realized that to achieve anything worthwhile required hard work. So she devoted herself completely to her studies, without taking time off for parties or distractions. Her dormitory neighbours were always running off to nightclubs or dates, then sharing their laughing impressions afterwards. They often invited Rennie along, but she always declined. Unlike these girls, she had no parents who could support her or help her get established in life. Rennie knew she would have to achieve everything on her own. This meant working extremely hard, though sometimes she felt she was missing important aspects of student life, bright moments passing her by. Rennie was a beautiful girl, and well aware of it. She likely inherited her looks from her unknown father, since her mother and grandmother were short and stocky, while Rennie had what her dorm mates called model height and appearance. "I don't understand why you're buried in textbooks with a figure like yours," her full-figured roommate Sue said thoughtfully while nibbling a pastry. "You could have found a rich man at the clubs by now, maybe even married him." "Beauty and youth are fleeting," Rennie replied, quoting her grandmother. "You need to think about the future and become self-sufficient." "Fleeting, yes," Sue agreed, "but while girls are young and beautiful, they should get what they can from men, especially when they look like you do." Sue sighed heavily. She constantly battled with her weight, trying various diets and joining fitness clubs, only to give up each time. Her bursts of determination were invariably followed by setbacks. Sue openly envied Rennie, who was naturally tall and slim, yet still shapely, like a goddess, as Sue put it. While Rennie appreciated the compliments about her appearance, she understood that looks weren't everything, and she couldn't afford to focus on dating right now. When sending her granddaughter off to study, her grandmother had warned her not to get distracted by trivial matters. "Don't repeat your mother's fate, of course. Having you was a joy, but a baby won't let you finish your studies. You'll have to work, and studying becomes nearly impossible with an infant in your arms. Education and career first, then personal life." Rennie agreed completely and acted accordingly. Then in her 3rd year, her grandmother fell ill and had to quit her job at the store. Her pension barely covered utilities and basic food, let alone medicine. She could no longer help her granddaughter financially. "Forgive me, my girl," the elderly woman said, crushed. "I promised to help, but my body failed me so unexpectedly." "It's all right," Rennie assured her grandmother. "All students work part-time nowadays." "But your studies, won't they suffer?" "Not at all. I've already built a reputation as a good student. You know what they say, first the student works for the grades, then the grades work for the student. I'll be fine." In truth, Rennie was frightened. She worried primarily about her grandmother's health, but she was also concerned about her own situation. How would she manage both work and studies? But as the saying goes, the eyes fear while the hands do the work. She began searching through job listings for part-time work with flexible hours. Courier work wasn't possible without transportation. Walking would take too much time for minimal pay. Waitressing at bars or cafes wouldn't work either, as the long shifts would force her to miss too many lectures. Then Rennie found an advertisement for a cleaning position. It was perfect. She'd known how to clean since childhood, and she could choose her own hours. She could work after classes or in the evenings, a few hours here and there, earning a decent income. Studies would become more challenging, certainly, but with determination she could manage. That was the main thing. Reenie's life in her final years of study was incredibly difficult. She had to juggle countless responsibilities. Attending classes, grabbing quick snacks, running between buildings until her back and arms ached, and finally returning to her dormitory room. There, she would study late into the night, sleeping only 4 to 5 hours at most. She still needed to eat, buy study supplies, and maintain a decent appearance at university. Despite everything, Reenie managed to send money to her grandmother for medicine. Life wasn't easy, and thoughts of anything beyond studying and work were impossible. She simply had neither time nor energy. Though Reenie was interested in dating, she had briefly considered Connor from the Parallel group. He was tall, thin, and amusing in his oversized sweaters and large glasses. Sue had encouraged her to consider him. "Why are you dismissing Connor? Do you know who his father is? He has a position in the finance department. Connor is a promising match." But Reenie brushed it off. First, how could she date with such a packed schedule? Second, Connor simply didn't spark any romantic feelings in her. He was somewhat awkward, though admittedly kind, with beautiful eyes, but he wasn't her type. Most importantly, it wasn't the right time. Reenie saw Connor as a good friend, rather than anything more, though he often helped her. When she missed lectures due to work, he shared his notes. If she was short on money in the cafeteria, he would cover the difference. Whenever Reenie tried to repay him, he refused to take what he called mere pennies. He carried her heavy textbooks to the dormitory and sometimes drove her to various locations after class in his car. Yes, Connor had his own car. It was a gift from his father for getting into a prestigious faculty. Though Connor came from an entirely different world that Reenie knew nothing about, he remained humble and down to earth, never showing a hint of arrogance. That's what Reenie appreciated about him. She was grateful to have someone who cared, but she couldn't reciprocate his feelings. She never made promises and consistently emphasized their friendship. Yet Connor continued to look at her with loving eyes. She felt sorry for him, but what else could she do? Then came what professors called the final stretch. The workload was so intense that students could barely lift their heads from their textbooks. Reenie had to quit her job, but she'd saved enough money for this crucial period. It would have lasted until she received her diploma, after which she could find proper employment. She was confident in her success. As a talented student with excellent grades, she believed employers would welcome her with open arms. She had worked so hard and was eager to put her knowledge into practice. Looking back later, Reenie was amazed at her naivety. Then disaster struck. Her life savings vanished when she accidentally left her purse on a bench near the university. Though she returned within 5 to 7 minutes, someone had already taken all her money. She nearly broke down crying in public, knowing she couldn't recover it. She could file a police report, but finding the thief seemed unlikely. It would only waste time. Reenie was desperate. How could she survive? Sue offered a solution. "Tell Connor everything. He'd gladly lend you money to get by." "That would be awkward." "What's awkward about it? He'd be happy to help. He's been sweet on you since freshman year." Reenie had no alternatives. She was jobless and finding work would take time. It would be weeks before she could earn her first paycheck. So she confided in Connor about her troubles. He expressed outrage at the theft, showing genuine sympathy, and naturally offered his help. Reenie knew well that Connor was the son of a very wealthy and influential man. He had never needed money since he was already earning his own income. His father had already secured him a modest position at the ministry. But everyone understood this was only the beginning of Connor's career. No one doubted the guy would soon become influential and wealthy. "My poor dear, You're so beautiful. It's incredible you face such a difficult fate, Connor said to her. A girl like you should live in luxury, enjoying shopping trips and expensive resort vacations. Not all this. Resorts, Renee grinned, who at 20-odd years had never seen the sea. What resorts? I can't even buy bread now. So you'll help me? I'll pay you back from my first paycheck. No, I won't, Connor said, and Renee looked at her interlocutor in surprise. I won't lend you, I'll just help you. But let's meet at the Scout Club today at 9. Do you know where that is? Renee nodded. The meeting place seemed unsuitable to her, but she wasn't in a position to argue. At the appointed time, Renee arrived at the club. Loud music, smoky air and drunken faces surrounded her. Vacant eyes and empty smiles everywhere. Renee felt perhaps too old-fashioned, but she couldn't understand the appeal. The crowd was so dense there wasn't room to move. How could she find Connor here? Suddenly he appeared, hugged her, kissed her cheek, and confidently led her away. They rounded a corner, slipped through a door under the stairs, and entered what seemed like a different world. The club's sounds became muffled. The interior was exquisite, the lighting soft. They climbed the stairs to a small room, resembling a private dining area. It contained just one table, with 2 leather couches. Have a seat, Connor suggested. Renee smiled and sat down. Is it just the 2 of us here? Are we expecting anyone else? The guy smirked, pouring champagne into a tall flute. Well, I don't know. You're enough for me. Connor handed the flute to Renee, who found everything about this situation strangely unsettling. This wasn't how she'd imagined meeting with Connor. So will you help me? Straight to the point. The guy shook his head. That's so typical of you. Always clutching, businesslike, purposeful. You should accomplish much with that character. I wish I could. But you can lose much too. What do you have in your life right now, besides work and school? These are your golden years, your youth. Well, what's my way out? The way out is right here. Connor smiled, pointing to himself. For your sake, I'm ready for anything. Probably everything. Renee suddenly felt uncomfortable. She clearly didn't like it here and wanted to leave immediately. You know I've been in love with you since freshman year. I tried dating others, but it's not the same. Connor moved closer. Renee tensed, fearing he might hug her or place his hand on her shoulder. But he didn't. You only see me as a friend, I know, but I still hope. And now this situation. You finally need my help. I'm ready to give it to you. Ready for so much. Only if you're ready to. Connor, I think you've misunderstood me. Renee tried to rise, but he grabbed her roughly, yanking her back onto the couch. She nearly fell backward. You're doing it again, playing hard to get. That's enough, you've gone too far. You're all I think about, no one else. You think I haven't tried to move on? Connor, I need to go, I'm scared. He studied her carefully, a strange grin playing on his lips. You'll get the money. 5 times what you asked for. No repayment needed, of course. Just 1 night with me. That's all I ask. Renee felt as if she'd been doused with ice water. All this time, she'd thought Connor was kind and simple, even somewhat awkward. She'd believed his feelings for her were pure and genuine. Renee had truly believed he would help her freely, as they'd been good friends for all these years, especially since the sum meant little to him. Now, however, disgust for Connor grew rapidly in her soul. He no longer seemed like a nice guy, with that predatory look of his. How had she never noticed before? The girl leaped from the sofa and rushed to the exit, Connor pursuing her. But Renee was quicker. She ran faster than she ever had. She burst through the club, squeezed past the dancers, and sprinted out onto the porch. The girl ran blindly. She could sense Connor was chasing her. She finally stopped near the dormitory, catching her breath, amazed she'd run such a distance without seeing where she was going. Her heart was pounding like crazy. Tears came to her eyes. She was left without money, even though the problem had seemed solved. She'd lost a friend, a good friend, or rather, she'd realized she'd never had one to begin with. Sue, after listening, sighed heavily. "What did you expect? I thought you understood from the start. Why didn't you agree? All your problems would have been solved at once, you fool." Renee only sobbed in response. Finally, she could let herself cry. Her body shook with sobs. "Oh, my dear, stop crying, please," Sue said, stroking her friend's head. "I told my parents about your situation. They'll lend you money. Everything will be fine. But you'll need to pay it back soon, so don't delay finding work. They're not rich themselves, you know." "Thank you," Renee said. "I'll pay everything back quickly." With the money from Sue's parents, Renee could keep living and soon successfully defended her diploma. She encountered Connor several times at the university. They no longer exchanged greetings. Sometimes she caught his gaze, which made her uncomfortable. She was grateful he didn't try to speak with her. Renee didn't know how she'd react if he attempted to apologize or, worse, insulted her. Then came the joyous moment when she received her long-awaited diploma. She had no doubts. As a promising young specialist, she would find a good job. Then her real life would begin. She would help her grandmother with medicines, repay Sue's parents, and buy nice things for herself. She dreamed of wearing beautiful clothes and eating good food. During her studies, she'd had to limit everything. But soon a different life would begin. How wrong she was. Reality proved cruel. As yesterday's graduate with no experience, nobody wanted her. Rejection followed rejection. She couldn't understand why until a recruiter explained it clearly. Employers needed someone who could start working immediately. No one wanted to deal with a recent graduate. Rena's situation seemed desperate. The money borrowed from Sue's parents was dwindling. She couldn't afford her rent. She'd had to lease a small apartment after losing her right to student housing. Trying to save her rapidly disappearing money, she went by foot to interviews across town. She ate more sparingly than ever, just milk, bread and cheap pasta. Of course, she could return to her village. While she wouldn't have to pay for housing there, what then? What work would she find? How would she survive? Her grandmother's pension was too small to support them both. Gradually, Renee reached a decision. Stop looking for work in her field. It wasn't going to happen. Better to take the familiar path and return to cleaning. An economist with honours, becoming a janitor. It was humiliating, but what choice did she have? Perhaps she'd find better work later. For now, she needed to earn a living. The girl quit her previous part-time job for the time of exams and preparation for the diploma. She had had no time then, focusing entirely on her studies. And now they no longer needed cleaners there. They were fully staffed. But finding similar work wasn't difficult. Renee knew how. Then an advertisement caught her eye. The office location was convenient and the salary seemed unusually attractive. Not expecting much, she called the number. They invited her for an interview immediately, and she started work the next day. Cleaning the building wasn't difficult. Yes, the area was large, but the surfaces were smooth, flat, and repair was recent, and the means of cleaning were expensive. High quality. In general, there were no problems with the work. Rini gradually met almost everyone on the team. Most were open and friendly. They treated the cleaning staff well, asking about her day and sharing their experiences. Some people didn't even say hello, of course, but this didn't bother Rini. After all, it wasn't her first time working as a cleaner. She was used to people not noticing the cleaning staff. They passed by, looked through them as if they were invisible. Rini wasn't offended or discouraged by this attitude. She had made some friends here, 2 young women from the personnel department, Linda and Naomi, who had also recently graduated from university. Their parents worked at the company and had secured them good positions with decent salaries. Linda and Naomi were inseparable, even looking like twin sisters, both smiling, blonde and slim. They were Rini's source for local gossip, teaching her who was at the company. Though this information wasn't vital to Rini, she found it fascinating. Alan Porter, the company's head, was a young man, just over 30, who had inherited the business from his father after the latter suffered a stroke. Despite his youth and initial inexperience, Alan quickly mastered the nuances of leadership and now ran the company with a firm hand. He was short, stocky and athletic, with intelligent dark eyes and a charming smile that he wore often. In general, he was quite pleasant. He regularly asked Rini about her schedule and whether she needed any cleaning supplies. He treated everyone as equals, speaking simply and naturally. Everyone at the company loved him, as far as Rini could tell. Alan was an ideal leader, moderately strict, understanding, and attentive to his subordinates' needs. He preferred positive reinforcement, though he could be stern when necessary. Rini had witnessed him sharply reprimanding a supplier who had attempted to deceive him. Mr. Porter's wife, Marissa, also worked at the company. She was slightly older than her husband, short, thin, with a pointed nose, tightly compressed lips, and small dark eyes that reminded one of a rat. Her expression was perpetually arrogant. Rini disliked her immediately, based purely on appearance, and her first impression proved correct. "Since you're here to work, then work," Marissa had told Rini one morning, running her finger along a dusty railing. When Rini explained she hadn't reached the 2nd floor yet, Marissa snapped. "For your salary, you should work faster. There are plenty of other applicants for this position. If you continue like this, I'll have you fired." According to Linda and Naomi, nobody liked Marissa. She held some vague position as an assistant to the head, though the secretary did all the real work. "She just creates an appearance of working," Naomi explained. "She struts around with an important expression, monitoring everyone," Linda added. "She craves power and money, but she's small time here. If it weren't for her husband, they wouldn't keep someone like her." What did he ever see in that rat? Naomi wondered aloud. According to Linda, who had heard it from her mother's friend, their parents had been long-time friends who had arranged the marriage to unite their fortune, almost like medieval royalty. When Rini asked about children, her personnel department friends explained that they had none. "Marissa can't have them," Linda said, though Naomi suggested it might be Alan's issue. Either way, they remained childless. Marissa spent her mornings prowling the offices, scrutinizing everyone's work. She'd made unpleasant remarks to everyone who spent too long at the water cooler or on the phone, speaking condescendingly even to employees twice her age. Rini observed all this while cleaning throughout the building. After lunch, Marissa would leave, claiming business matters. "She's off to beauty salons and shops," Linda declared confidently. There was no reason to doubt this. Rini had never seen Marissa doing actual work, apart from occasionally glancing at financial reports to track the success of the company. The office notably relaxed after her daily departure, as if a weight had lifted. "How does the boss tolerate her?" Naomi sighed. "Such a difficult person." "Oh, she might be different with him," Linda shrugged. "Don't you see, she knows how to play sweet when it suits her." "It's understandable. Alan is the man who provides for their family's fortune. She'll never get away from him." It had been about 6 months since Rini had taken the job, and she already felt like she belonged in this friendly team. She was invited to employees' birthdays celebrated in the office. People socialised with her, and she found joy in coming to work each morning. Though she continued searching for a position in her speciality, unsuccessfully, it was frustrating, but didn't dampen her spirits. Rini felt that everything, work, career and love, still lay ahead of her. The salary was more than adequate. She could afford rent, food, clothes, and even help her grandmother. She had long since repaid her debt to Sue's parents, which brought her particular satisfaction. Sue, her old college friend, worked as an economist at the factory, thanks to her uncle's arrangement. Sue enjoyed her work and mentioned that a position would soon open up when one of the employees went on maternity leave. Though the factory's location wasn't ideal and the salary was lower than what she earned as a cleaner, Rini remained hopeful. With her diploma, she knew cleaning wouldn't be her lifelong career. It was an ordinary weekday afternoon. Rini was cleaning the central staircase, nearly finished with the first floor. Her back ached and her hands buzzed with familiar tension. Soon she'd be done and could rest. Then she heard footsteps from above. Someone was coming down. Rini moved her bucket aside to clear the path. It appeared to be Mr. Porter's visitor, a young man in an expensive business suit and snow-white shirt, tall, thin, and somewhat awkward. Suddenly, Rini felt as if struck by lightning. It was Connor, the same person she'd considered a good friend for years, until he'd treated her so cruelly at the end of their studies. He recognized her, too. He stopped, smiling, studying his former classmate with undisguised interest. Rini felt utterly uncomfortable, wishing she could disappear from his penetrating gaze. "Well, hello, beautiful," said Connor. "Hello," Rini replied softly. "You work here as a cleaner?" He emphasized the last word deliberately. Rini nodded silently. She'd never been ashamed of her work, but from Connor's lips, cleaner sounded like an insult. "The cleaning lady who thought she was a queen. I wasn't good enough for you. Well, fate has put everything in its place. There is justice in the world," Connor said mockingly. Rini grabbed her bucket, ready to leave, his taunts unbearable. "Wait!" Connor caught her hand. "What a nice discovery. Have you realized the mistake you made yet?" "Let me go, Connor." "A penniless cleaning lady in a dirty coat, not a princess. Now you would agree to my proposal, right? But it's too late, I have someone." He paused. "And you'll stay a beggar, working in dirty water until retirement." "Don't you dare insult my employees." Mr. Porter appeared on the stairs, his eyebrows furrowed, his gaze stern. Connor deflated immediately, releasing Rina's hand. "You misunderstood. She's an old acquaintance. I'm just surprised that—" "Apologize to her," Alan demanded. "And mind yourself better. Your reports are full of mistakes. I'm tired of correcting them. You're a specialist. Work like one." "I'm sorry," Connor muttered, looking at Rini. He clearly dared not disobey Alan, too much depending on the boss's favour. Alan continued on his way, Connor trailing behind. Rennie remained alone on the stairs. Her heart pounded, emotions overwhelming her. The dominant feeling wasn't resentment toward Connor, but joy that Mr. Porter had defended her. It touched her deeply. Mr. Porter was a genuinely pleasant, down-to-earth man, unlike his predatory wife. The entire team wondered how such a harpy as Marissa had landed such a wonderful husband. Their relationship seemed peculiar to Rennie. She noticed a distinct coldness between them, particularly from his side. They interacted like ordinary colleagues. No meaningful glances, no gentle touches, no playful banter. Their conversations stayed strictly business-related. Perhaps they'd simply agreed to maintain professional decorum at work. For reasons she couldn't explain, Rennie hoped Alan regarded Marissa at home with the same detachment, calm and indifferent. Rennie understood her feelings better after one incident. It was November. Mr. Porter was working late. The office had been empty for hours since the workday ended. The chief had been reviewing reports, first with his assistant, then alone, struggling to make the numbers add up. Rennie had just finished her second shift and was mopping the halls when it started pouring. The November evening was cold, dark and wet. She dreaded the thought of walking to the bus stop in such weather. Unfortunately, she had only worn a light raincoat that morning. The day had started sunny and warm, with no hint of the weather to come. She hadn't even brought an umbrella. She couldn't afford a cab. This month's money had gone to her grandmother's expensive medicines and winter shoes. Until her next paycheck, she needed to save every penny, and cab drivers would surely charge extra in this weather. With a heavy heart, Rennie finished cleaning. She went to the staff room, changed her clothes, and said goodbye to the night guard, and stepped onto the porch. She hesitated under the awning, reluctant to brave the icy rain. Suddenly, headlights cut through the autumn gloom. Rennie recognized Mr. Porter's car pulling up to the porch. She had thought he was still working on reports. While she had been changing, Alan had finished his work and gone down to the parking lot. He lowered his window and called out, "Rennie, it's pouring. Let me give you a ride." "Thank you. No need." Rennie knew his house was in an upscale village near the highway, quite far from her neighbourhood. "You're not dressed for this weather," he insisted. "The health of my employees matters to me. Don't argue. I don't want to look for your replacement while you're on sick leave." Rennie smiled and gratefully slipped into the warm, cosy interior of his luxurious car. They chatted like old friends during the drive, discussing weather and movies, discovering they enjoyed the same series and actors. Alan asked about her life and was surprised by her story. "That's not easy," he said softly. All too soon, Rennie's house emerged from the darkness. She didn't want to leave the warm cabin. She wished she could ride with Alan for hours more. His presence was so comforting. His conversation, his voice. If only the moment could last forever. Rennie tried to hide her feelings, knowing the gulf between them. She was just a cleaning lady struggling to get by. And Alan had a wife, Marissa, elegant, well-groomed from a wealthy family. Rennie knew she couldn't even dream in that direction, but she couldn't help. "Thank you so much," Rennie smiled at Alan. He nodded and drove away, heading home to his wife. That night, sleep eluded her. She kept replaying their brief journey together. His words, his smile, his eyes focused on the road, his distinguished profile. That's when Rennie realized, with a jolt of horror, that she had fallen in love for the first time, and with her married CEO, no less. What bad luck. At work, Rennie tried to maintain her distance and avoid looking at Alan, yet something had shifted between them after that ride. Nothing concrete, but his greetings became warmer, more cheerful. Her heart would pound at the sight of him so forcefully that she wondered how others wouldn't hear it. One morning near New Year's Eve, with the office building festively decorated inside and out with twinkling lights, Renee was doing her usual cleaning routine on the top floor. She always started from the top and worked her way down. It was more efficient that way. Marissa's office was under the roof, its door ajar, a signal that cleaning was permitted. When Marissa wanted privacy to appear busy, she would lock herself inside. Renee quietly entered the office. It had 2 rooms, a small reception area for visitors, connected to Marissa's main workspace. Thinking the office was empty, Renee began cleaning the first room. She moved quickly and quietly, a habit developed over years of cleaning to avoid disturbing others. Suddenly, Marissa's soft voice drifted from the second room. "You think he's going to buy that?" "Why not?" a man's voice answered, vaguely familiar and somehow unpleasant. Renee froze. She immediately realized this was about something dishonest, if not criminal. She was eager to know more. Some inner instinct told her this conversation posed danger for Alan. "He will sign a contract with a couple of empty fields," the man said. "It's hard to suspect anything. I'll fill in the missing data later, and that's it. The firm will be transferred to me and therefore to you. Then you can finally leave your husband for me. And I'll be free from my father and his career plans. I don't want to work where he pointed to me. I want my freedom, my own business." "You are a promising and ambitious guy," said Marissa, her voice sweet like the fox from the Pinocchio fairy tale. "You have a brilliant plan," continued the man. "I've always liked women like you. Age gives you a special charm. Not everyone has it, but you certainly do." Now, be careful with your words," Marissa playfully scolded. "Especially about age. I'm not even 40 yet." All this seemed utterly bizarre. Marissa was actively flirting with someone. More importantly, she and her suitor were plotting to deceive Alan and steal his firm. Renee didn't know what to do. If she left now, they would hear her and realize she had overheard their conversation. What to do? The solution came naturally. Renee stepped toward the door and slammed it loudly, as if she had just entered. Marissa's disgruntled face appeared from the second room. Seeing Renee, she inhaled sharply. "You again?" the woman said coldly. Her companion remained hidden in the second room, pretending she wasn't there. "I am," the girl replied. "I could clean the floors now or come back later." Then Connor emerged from the first room, wearing a contemptuous grin. So that's who Marissa was talking to, Renee thought. No way! Are they lovers? Marissa and Connor had no idea she had been listening to their conversation. That was fortunate. "Well, who do I see?" said Connor, spreading into a fake, friendly smile. "An old acquaintance." "You know each other?" Marissa asked too eagerly. "Of course, we studied at the university together." "What? The cleaning woman has a degree?" "Yes, though it's not going to do her much good," Connor laughed. "I see. Renee, come back later. We're talking here. You can mop the floors another time." Marissa's gaze shifted between Renee and Connor. Something seemed to dawn on her, and suddenly she added, "No, don't come back later. You're fired. Pack your things and leave." Renee hadn't expected that. Even Connor gasped in surprise and turned to his mistress. "Marissa, what are you doing?" "She's been irritating me for ages, always appearing at the wrong time, taking too long to clean, chatting with everyone. You think I didn't notice you speaking with Linda and Naomi from HR instead of working?" "I won't do it again," Renee whispered childishly. She needed this job, this salary. She needed to see Alan daily, even from afar, even just a glimpse. It had become vital to her existence. "Leave your bucket right here. We'll find a replacement immediately, don't worry. I'm going to HR now to prepare the termination papers. They'll be ready by the time you change. You haven't been meeting expectations for a while." Renee turned and left the office. She rushed down the stairs to the staff room, thankfully empty. She collapsed onto the couch, buried her face in a pillow, and sobbed. She felt humiliated, deceived, and utterly helpless. Marissa clearly hadn't realized Renee had overheard her conversation with her young lover. They had meticulously planned to steal Alan's business. But Renee hadn't lost her job because the boss's wife suspected her knowledge. No, Marissa was simply jealous of Connor's attention toward her. Despite his cruel behaviour, Connor still looked at Renee in that special way. His feelings remained strong, and Marissa saw that. About 30 minutes passed as Renee tried to control her sobs and compose herself. She didn't want to face people with swollen lips and red eyes. Then Naomi and Linda burst into the staff room. They rushed to hug Renee and began telling her something soothing. "We know everything," Linda rambled. Marissa stormed into the personnel department, furious as a Valkyrie. "Like a harpy," Naomi corrected. "She looked more like a harpy, frightening like that. She said that she was dismissing you for incompatibility with your position. Why did she get so angry with you? She was terribly angry. Did you say something to her?" Renee shook her head. "Don't you know, Marissa?" Linda sighed. "Remember how she threw out Helen and Mrs. Wells? She doesn't need a reason. She's just an angry, impulsive person. And Alan isn't right here now. We hoped he would save you, but he's away on a business trip for 2 days." "You're still here?" Marissa asked in an icy voice. No one had noticed her entering the staff room. Linda and Naomi fell silent, watching the local tormentor. They wondered if she had heard them calling her harpy. But Marissa seemed focused only on Renee, looking at her like some pathetic, nasty insect. "I'm leaving already." At home, Renee cried once more, then suddenly realized she couldn't leave everything as it was. She had to warn Alan about the danger he faced. He needed to be especially careful with the documents his spouse and Connor were showing him. Her friends had said he'd be gone for 2 days. Perfect. Renee would go to the office then, head straight to his office and tell him everything. He could decide what to do with the information. But 2 days later, her plan failed. The guard, who had always treated Renee kindly, wouldn't let her past the gatehouse. "It's not allowed. Marissa ordered not to let you near the doorstep," he reported apologetically. "How? Why?" "I don't know what you've done to upset her. Probably nothing, it's just how she is. But please understand, I can't risk my job. I have a son in university and a daughter who needs help. She's raising my grandchildren alone. I'm so sorry." Renee nodded in understanding. She couldn't get into the office, and she still could try waiting for Mr. Porter in the parking lot by his car. But no, she needed a different approach, and it formed in Renee's mind instantly. This plan required preparation, so Renee went straight to the cosmetics store. Yes, cosmetics. She needed makeup brighter than usual, and a wig, preferably inexpensive. Standing before her mirror, Renee saw how the wig and makeup transformed her face beyond recognition. Shapeless clothes completed the effect. She was unrecognizable, exactly as planned. Marissa had ordered them to keep Renee out, but neither the guard nor her own grandmother would recognize her now. She could get into the office unhindered and finally talk to Mr. Porter. He was definitely at work today, Naomi had confirmed this with Rennie that morning. The guard didn't recognise the brightly made-up middle-aged woman as the young former employee and let her go to an interview. Rennie stood in front of Mr. Porter's door. Finally she would see him again. She had missed him terribly. Though it had only been a few days since she'd last seen him, she yearned for his look and smile. Something had to be done about these feelings. Rennie opened the door and froze. The scene before her was unimaginable. Alan lay convulsing on the floor, his face ashen, his eyes dark with pain and horror, foam coating his lips. Marissa stood over him, wearing a strange smile. But then she startled and fixed her gaze on the visitor. "Who are you?" Marissa demanded, staring at the unexpected visitor. Confusion crossed her face. She had clearly forgotten to lock the door. Rennie remained silent. She stared at Alan in shock, realizing that in moments it would be too late to save him. She spun around and raced down the corridor, shouting, "Ambulance! Call an ambulance! Mr. Porter is ill!" Ambulance arrived quickly. Alan was rushed to the hospital, with Marissa accompanying him. This raised alarm bells in Rennie's mind. There was no telling what Marissa might do during the journey. Somehow Rennie knew with certainty that Alan's wife was behind his seizure. That telling smile as she had watched him suffer. Rennie was terrified. What if Alan couldn't be saved? People gathered around her, all the employees she knew, bombarding her with questions about what had happened and who she was. 2 months had passed since that fateful visit to the office. Alan had recovered and left the hospital, while Marissa and Connor faced investigation. Rennie had returned to the company, now as an economist. The department had an opening and Mr. Porter hired her. She threw herself into the work enthusiastically, grateful to finally put her knowledge into practice. Life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Yet 2 months ago her world had nearly shattered. She had been so frightened for Alan, but he had survived. Tests revealed poison in his blood. Without the ambulance he would have died, leaving no trace of poison for an autopsy to detect. They found poison residue on a water bottle. It bore numerous fingerprints from both Marissa and her young lover. The investigation proceeded swiftly and thoroughly, despite interference from both Marissa's and Connor's influential parents. Marissa wanted to leave her husband, but not empty-handed, and aimed to take his business. Her young lover had a dream of becoming a businessman. Connor hated his low ministry position, chafing under his father's control and his superior's authority. He craved freedom, adventure, and quick money. The couple first attempted to trick Alan with a deceptive contract. When the experienced businessman didn't fall for it, the lovers turned to Plan B. Marissa obtained the substance. Everything seemed to be working perfectly. Alan drank the water his wife offered and began to choke. At that moment, a vibrant stranger with red hair and colourful clothing burst into the office. She assessed the situation instantly and called for help. When Alan regained consciousness, they told him about Rennie and he called her. They spoke for an hour. Rennie broke down in tears, from relief, from overwhelming emotion, from the joy of hearing her beloved's voice again. She began visiting him in the hospital. They talked endlessly, neither wanting to part. When Alan discovered her economics degree with honours, he insisted on hiring his saviour, but not as a cleaner. After his discharge, Alan asked Rennie on a date. She wasn't surprised. It felt inevitable. Their relationship deepened quickly, and Rennie felt blissfully happy. She dared not imagine what might have happened had she not arrived at the office that day.